Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the EDS Nightfall and watched the stars through the main viewing screen. The ship moved through space without making a sound, just like all ships did in the emptiness between worlds. But this ship was different from every other vessel that had ever been built. This ship could do things that would make the rulers of the galaxy wake up screaming from their sleep. For 50 years, humanity had been nothing more than a small, annoying bug to the great powers of the galaxy. The Galactic Council ruled over 3,000 worlds and controlled trade routes that stretched across the entire known universe. When human ships first appeared at their borders, the alien races laughed and pointed at the crude metal boxes that humans called starships. The Council gave humanity one small mining colony on the edge of nowhere and then forgot they existed. The aliens thought humans were stupid and weak. They were wrong about both things. Jake looked at the control panels around him and smiled. Every button and screen on this bridge represented technology that the galaxy had never seen before. While the Council races spent thousands of years making their energy shields a little bit stronger and their plasma weapons a little bit more powerful, humans had gone in a completely different direction. They had learned to control dark matter itself. Dr. Ryan Clark sat at his station and watched numbers scroll across his screens. The dark matter containment systems were working perfectly. The ship existed in normal space, but also existed somewhere else at the same time. The aliens had sensors that could detect anything that moved through regular space, but they could not see the Nightfall even if it was sitting right next to them. Admiral Lisa Kane appeared on the communication screen from Earth Central Command. Her face looked serious and determined. She had spent 20 years planning for this moment, 20 years of secret construction and hidden research facilities. 20 years of letting the galaxy think that humans were harmless farmers and miners who barely knew how to fix their own ships. The authorization code came through the communication system. The test was approved. Today, they would find out if all those years of work had been worth it. Today, the galaxy would learn that underestimating humanity was the biggest mistake they had ever made. The target was a group of Vorthon pirates who had been attacking human cargo ships for the past 6 months. The Vorthons were large green creatures with 4 arms and bad attitudes. They thought humans were easy prey because human ships seemed slow and poorly armed. The Galactic Council knew about the pirate attacks but did nothing to stop them. Human lives were not important enough to waste Council resources. Commander Alex Turner sat at the weapons control station and checked his systems one more time. The dark matter torpedoes were loaded and ready. Each torpedo was a small piece of impossibility wrapped in human engineering. They could pass through energy shields like those shields were made of air. They could appear inside enemy ships without having to break through the hull first. The Vorthons had never seen anything like them because nothing like them had ever existed before. Jake watched the long-range sensors as 12 Vorthon ships moved toward their position. The pirates were confident and careless. They had destroyed hundreds of human cargo vessels over the years and never lost a single ship in return. They thought this would be just another easy target. The Vorthons would never see the Nightfall coming. Their most advanced scanners could not detect dark matter signatures. To them, space looked completely empty right up until the moment the human ship opened fire. It was like being attacked by invisible ghosts who could strike from anywhere and disappear without leaving a trace. Dr. Clark monitored the power systems as the ship prepared for combat. The dark matter reactor was running at optimal levels. The weapon systems were charged and ready. The stealth systems were functioning perfectly. Every piece of technology on this ship represented a breakthrough that would have taken the Council races centuries to achieve, if they could achieve it at all. The beautiful thing about dark matter technology was that it required a special kind of thinking. It required the ability to imagine things that seemed impossible and then figure out how to make them real. Humans were very good at that kind of thinking. The alien races were not. Jake gave the order to move to attack position. The Nightfall slid through space like a shadow, completely invisible to the approaching pirates. The Vorthons continued on their course, talking and laughing on their communication channels about how they were going to split up the cargo from their next human victim. Admiral Kane watched the tactical display from her command center on Earth. This was the moment that would change everything. For too long, humanity had been forced to accept whatever scraps the galaxy was willing to give them. Human ships had been destroyed, human colonies had been raided, and human lives had been lost while the great powers of the universe looked the other way. That time was ending today. The Vorthan fleet spread out into attack formation as they approached what they thought was empty space. Their weapons were powered up and their shields were activated. They were ready for a fight against cargo haulers and mining ships. They were not ready for the EDS nightfall. Colonel Maria Santos waited in the tactical center aboard the ship, watching as her carefully planned operation moved toward its climax. She had studied every piece of intelligence about Vorthan ships and weapons. She knew exactly how they would react when the impossible started happening around them. Fear and confusion would be their enemies long before the human weapons reached their hulls. The moment had arrived. Jake looked around his bridge one more time and saw the faces of his crew. They were nervous but determined. They knew they were about to make history. They knew they were about to show the galaxy that humanity was done being pushed around. The order came through the communication system from Admiral Kane. The test was authorized. The demonstration could begin. Jake Morrison took a deep breath and spoke the words that would echo across the galaxy for generations to come. Fire all weapons. The dark matter torpedoes left the EDS nightfall without making any sound or light that the Vorthan pirates could detect. The weapons moved through space like invisible death, following paths that existed in both normal space and the dark matter realm at the same time. Commander Alex Turner watched his targeting systems track each torpedo as they approached their targets. The first torpedo reached the lead Vorthan ship and did something that should have been impossible. It passed through the energy shields like they were not even there. The purple energy barriers that protected the pirate vessel meant nothing to a weapon that existed partially outside normal physics. The torpedo materialized inside the ship's engine room and exploded with enough force to tear the vessel apart from the inside. Captain Vex of the Vorthan Raiders saw his flagship disappear in a ball of fire and could not understand what had happened. His sensors showed no enemy ships anywhere in the area. His weapons officers reported no incoming missiles or energy beams. One moment his lead ship was there, and the next moment it was spreading debris across space. The second and third torpedoes struck two more Vorthan ships at exactly the same time. Both vessels exploded from within, their hulls bursting outward as internal explosions ripped through their vital systems. The remaining 9 pirate ships began turning in all directions, trying to find an enemy that their scanners insisted was not there. Jake Morrison watched the battle from the bridge of the nightfall with calm satisfaction. The human ship remained completely invisible to the panicking pirates. The Vorthan sensors were designed to detect energy signatures, metal hulls, and electromagnetic radiation. They could not see dark matter containment fields or ships that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Dr. Ryan Clark monitored the weapon systems as they prepared to fire again. The dark matter torpedoes were reloading automatically, drawing power from the ship's incredible reactor. Each weapon cost more to build than an entire Vorthan ship, but the results spoke for themselves. 3 enemy vessels had been destroyed in less than 30 seconds, and the pirates still had no idea where the attack was coming from. The Vorthan pirates began firing their weapons randomly into empty space, hoping to hit whatever was killing their ships. Plasma bolts and energy beams shot out in every direction, lighting up the darkness with bright flashes of destructive power. None of their shots came anywhere close to the nightfall because they could not see it to aim at it. Commander Alex Turner launched the second wave of torpedoes. 6 more weapons streaked toward their targets, invisible and unstoppable. The Vorthan ships tried to run, but there was nowhere to go. The dark matter torpedoes could track their targets across vast distances and would not stop until they found their mark. Captain Vex screamed orders at his weapons crews and demanded answers from his science officers. How could enemy ships be attacking them without appearing on any sensors? How could weapons penetrate their shields without triggering any defensive systems? His crew had no answers because nothing in their experience had prepared them for this kind of warfare. The next 6 Vorthan ships died just like the first 3. The torpedoes appeared inside their hulls and exploded with devastating results. Metal bulkheads twisted and melted, atmosphere vented into space, and electrical systems overloaded in showers of sparks. The pirates had been reduced from 12 ships to 3 in less than 2 minutes. Dr. Clark received a priority message from Admiral Kane on Earth. The test was proceeding exactly as planned. The dark matter technology was performing better than even the most optimistic projections had predicted. The weapon systems were stable, the stealth capabilities were perfect, and the enemy was completely helpless against attacks they could not see or understand. The 3 surviving Vorthon ships tried to escape by jumping to faster than light speed, but Jake Morrison was not going to let them go. Those ships would return to their bases and tell other pirates about the mysterious attack. The story would spread through the criminal networks and eventually reach the ears of the Galactic Council. That was exactly what humanity wanted. The final 3 torpedoes caught the fleeing Vorthon ships just as they were entering hyperspace. The weapons followed their targets into the faster-than-light realm and exploded inside the enemy hulls while they were between dimensions. The resulting destruction was spectacular, creating brief tears in space itself that flashed like lightning before closing again. Colonel Maria Santos reviewed the battle data as the last pieces of Vorthon debris drifted away into the void. 12 enemy ships had been destroyed in under 5 minutes. The human vessel had taken no damage and used less than 10% of its available ammunition. The Nightfall was ready to fight again immediately if needed. The communication systems aboard. The Nightfall intercepted emergency broadcasts from other pirate groups in the area. Word of the impossible battle was already spreading. Ship captains who had never shown fear of anything were talking about ghost ships and invisible enemies. The criminal organizations that had terrorized human shipping for decades were suddenly afraid. Jake Morrison gave the order to move to the next target area. 3 more dark matter warships were already in position around the galaxy, ready to begin their own operations. The EDS Phantom would strike at a slave trading convoy near the Centauri system. The EDS Voidwalker would eliminate a group of raiders who had been attacking medical supply ships. The EDS Shadow Strike would destroy a fleet of mercenaries who worked for corrupt council officials. Admiral Kane watched the tactical reports from Earth with growing excitement. The plan was working perfectly. For too long, the galaxy had ignored human suffering because they thought humans were too weak to fight back. Now they would learn that humanity had been preparing for this moment for decades. Dr. Ryan Clark began preparing the stealth systems for departure. The Nightfall would vanish from this location and appear somewhere else, without leaving any trace of where it had gone. The pirates who investigated this area would find only debris and radiation signatures that made no sense according to known physics. The age of human weakness was ending. The galaxy was about to discover that the quiet farmers and miners from Earth had become the most dangerous military force in known space. The Vorthon pirates had been just the beginning. Soon, every criminal organization and corrupt official in the galaxy would learn to fear the invisible ships that struck without, warning and disappeared without trace. The revolution had begun. The emergency session of the Galactic Council began at dawn on Centris Prime, the capital world that had ruled the galaxy for 3,000 years. Representatives from every major species gathered in the Great Assembly Hall, their faces showing worry and confusion that had not been seen in centuries. The mighty powers that controlled trade routes and commanded vast fleets were experiencing something they had almost forgotten existed: fear. Ambassador Helen Wright sat in the small human delegation booth and watched the chaos unfold around her. The other species were arguing loudly, demanding explanations for events that made no sense according to everything they thought they knew about warfare and technology. She kept her face calm and professional, even though she knew exactly what was causing their panic. Chancellor Vex of the Altarian Empire stood at the central podium and slammed his 6-fingered hand down on the speaking platform. His purple skin had turned almost black with rage as he described the destruction of 3 Altarian border fleets in the past week. Each fleet had been attacked by enemies that could not be detected, could not be tracked, and could not be fought using any known methods. The Zephyrian delegate took the floor next and spoke in a voice that shook with barely controlled terror. The Zephyrians had mastered energy manipulation over 1,000 years ago and believed their weapons were the most advanced in the galaxy. Now their most powerful energy beams were passing harmlessly through empty space while invisible enemies destroyed their ships from within. Captain Steve Rogers commanded the EDS Nightfall as it moved silently through the heart of Council space, completely undetected despite being surrounded by the most sophisticated sensor networks ever built. The ship drifted past military installations and government facilities like a ghost, recording everything and transmitting the intelligence back to Earth through communication channels that existed in dark matter space. The Council races had spent millennia perfecting their technologies along predictable paths. Better shields meant stronger energy barriers. Better weapons meant more powerful plasma cannons. Better sensors meant wider detection ranges for known forms of matter and energy. None of them had ever imagined that an entire parallel realm of physics existed right alongside their normal universe. Dr. Emma Foster analyzed the intercepted communications from her position in the ship's intelligence center. The alien powers were terrified because they faced an enemy whose capabilities they could not understand, copy, or counter. Every report from the field described the same impossible events: ships being destroyed by weapons that passed through their defenses, fleets being attacked by enemies that sensors insisted were not there. The hegemony representative spoke next, his insect-like features clicking with anxiety as he described the loss of an entire patrol squadron near the Rigel system. The ships had been found drifting in space with their hulls torn open from the inside, but there were no energy signatures or debris patterns that matched any known weapon type. It was as if the ships had been destroyed by invisible monsters. Ambassador Wright received a coded message through her personal communication device. Admiral Kane was reporting that Phase 2 of the operation was proceeding exactly as planned. 20 human dark matter warships were now operating throughout Council space, striking carefully selected targets and vanishing without trace. The psychological impact was even greater than the military damage. The Corvalian trade minister stood up and demanded immediate action. His species controlled most of the galaxy's commercial shipping, and their profits were dropping rapidly as cargo haulers refused to travel without massive military escorts. Insurance companies were canceling policies for routes where the mysterious attacks had occurred. The galactic economy was beginning to suffer as fear spread through the trading networks. Captain Rogers watched his tactical display as a Council patrol fleet passed within 50 kilometers of his position. The alien ships were running intensive sensor sweeps, desperately searching for any sign of the invisible enemies that had been terrorizing their forces. Their scanners were powerful enough to detect a single metal bolt floating in space, but they could not see the massive human warship that was close enough to read their hull markings. The debate in the Council chambers grew more heated as representatives accused each other of hiding secret weapons or making deals with unknown alien powers. The Vorthans claimed that humans were somehow responsible, but they had no evidence beyond the fact that most attacks seemed to target ships that had been preying on human colonies. The other species dismissed this theory because everyone knew that humans barely had enough technology to keep their cargo ships running. Dr. Foster intercepted a priority communication between the Council's top military commanders. They were planning to deploy their combined fleets in a massive search operation, hoping to find and destroy the mysterious enemy ships through sheer numbers. The alien commanders had no idea that human vessels could observe their most secret planning sessions while remaining completely invisible. The Galactic Council had ruled the universe for so long that they had forgotten what it felt like to be helpless. Their ancestors had fought wars of conquest and expansion, but the current generation had only known peace and prosperity. They were not prepared for an enemy that could strike from anywhere and disappear without leaving any clues about their identity or location. Ambassador Wright stood up and requested permission to address the assembly. The chamber fell silent as she walked to the speaking platform with calm dignity. She had been waiting for this moment for months, and now it was time to plant the seeds that would grow into full-scale panic. She spoke in a clear voice that carried to every corner of the Great Hall. Humanity was deeply concerned about the recent attacks on peaceful shipping, she said. Earth wanted to offer assistance in tracking down these mysterious raiders. Perhaps human ships could help patrol the trade routes, since they seemed to be ignored by whatever force was destroying Council fleets. The offer was met with nervous laughter from some delegates and angry protests from others. The idea that primitive humans could help protect advanced alien civilizations seemed ridiculous. But Ambassador Wright noticed that several representatives were looking at her with new suspicion. as if they were beginning to wonder if the quiet species from Earth might know more than they were admitting. Admiral Kane watched the council session through intercepted video feeds and smiled with satisfaction. The galaxy's rulers were finally beginning to understand that their age of dominance was ending. Soon they would face a choice between negotiation and total defeat, and humanity would be ready for either option. The largest military fleet in galactic history assembled at the Nexus Point, where 12 major trade routes crossed paths through a region of space that had seen peace for over 1,000 years. 500 warships from 7 different council species formed battle lines that stretched across 3 entire star systems. The combined armada represented the full military might of civilizations that had ruled the galaxy since before humans had learned to make fire. Admiral Korath of the Hegemony commanded the united forces from his flagship, the Eternal Dominion. The massive vessel was 3 kilometers long and carried enough firepower to destroy entire planets. Around him, the greatest warriors and most advanced technologies in known space waited for an enemy that might already be among them without anyone knowing it. Captain Pete Johnson aboard the EDS Nightfall watched the enemy preparations from a position that should have been impossible to achieve. His ship hung motionless just 5 kilometers from the Hegemony flagship, close enough to see individual aliens moving past the viewing ports. The dark matter stealth systems made the human vessel completely invisible to every sensor and detection method the Council forces possessed. The alien fleet had been waiting for 3 standard days, their nerves growing more frayed with each passing hour. Their sensors swept constantly through space, searching for any sign of the mysterious enemy ships that had been terrorizing their forces for months. Scanner operators reported phantom contacts that vanished when investigated, technical malfunctions that seemed to suggest unknown interference, and energy readings that made no sense according to established physics. Lieutenant Sarah Davis monitored enemy communications from her station aboard the Nightfall and listened to the growing panic in alien voices. Ship captains were reporting strange dreams and unexplained equipment failures. Crew members claimed to see shadows moving in empty corridors and hear sounds that had no source. The psychological pressure of fighting an invisible enemy was destroying morale faster than any weapon could. Admiral Korath tried to maintain discipline among his forces, but he could feel control slipping away with each hour that passed. His officers demanded action, his crews whispered about supernatural enemies, and his allies questioned whether this massive deployment was worth the cost. The greatest military commander in hegemony history was watching his perfect formation slowly fall apart from fear alone. Around the main fleet, 19 other human dark matter warships maintained their positions like predators waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The EDS Phantom drifted silently among the Altarian battle group, recording their weapon configurations and shield frequencies. The EDS Voidwalker positioned itself inside the Zephyrian formation, close enough to overhear conversations on their bridge decks. The EDS's Shadow Strike floated near the Council command vessel, monitoring every strategic decision in real time. The waiting was part of Admiral Kane's strategy. She had studied the psychology of every major galactic species and knew that fear of the unknown was more powerful than direct assault. The Council fleet was destroying itself from within, discipline breaking down as crews realized they might be fighting ghosts that could appear anywhere at any time. Dr. Ryan Clark watched his instruments as the dark matter containment systems prepared for the largest coordinated attack in human history. 20 ships would strike simultaneously across a battle zone that covered multiple star systems. Each vessel would target specific enemy formations while remaining completely invisible to retaliation. The mathematics of the assault were elegant in their simplicity, maximum damage with zero risk. The Council forces had arranged themselves in classic defensive formations that had been perfected over centuries of conventional warfare. Their heavy battleships formed the center line, supported by fast cruisers and protected by swarms of fighter craft. Energy shield generators created overlapping barriers that could stop any known weapon. It was a beautiful example of military engineering that would be completely useless against enemies who could appear inside their defenses. Commander Alex Turner prepared his weapon systems as the final authorization arrived from Earth Central Command. The dark matter torpedoes were loaded and ready, each one capable of materializing inside enemy hulls without triggering any defensive systems. The Council fleet had no protection against weapons that existed partially outside normal space-time. Admiral Korath received reports of increasing equipment malfunctions throughout his fleet. Navigation systems were showing impossible readings, communication arrays were picking up signals from empty space, and sensor operators swore they could detect ships that vanished whenever they tried to focus on them. The alien commander was beginning to suspect that his enemies were already among his forces, watching and waiting for the perfect moment to reveal themselves. The attack began at exactly the same moment across all 3 star systems. 20 human ships materialized simultaneously throughout the Council formation, appearing inside their protective barriers as if they had been there all along. The dark matter vessels became visible for just long enough to launch their weapons, before fading back into invisibility. The first wave of torpedoes struck the enemy flagship and 6 heavy battleships at the same instant. The weapons passed through energy shields like they were made of empty air and exploded inside the enemy hulls with devastating force. The Eternal Dominion, pride of the hegemony fleet, broke apart in a ball of fire that could be seen from neighboring star systems. Panic spread through the Council forces as their most powerful ships began exploding from within. Weapons officers fired frantically at targets they could not see, often hitting their own allies in the confusion. Fighter pilots ejected from their craft, rather than face invisible enemies who could destroy them without warning. The perfect military formation dissolved into chaos in less than 5 minutes. Captain Johnson watched the destruction with professional satisfaction as his ship moved through the enemy fleet like a ghost among the living. The Council forces were shooting at shadows while human weapons struck with surgical precision. Every torpedo found its target, every shot counted, and every enemy vessel that tried to escape was hunted down by invisible predators. The battle lasted exactly 17 minutes from start to finish. When the shooting finally stopped, the greatest fleet in galactic history had simply ceased to exist. 500 warships had been reduced to drifting debris and expanding clouds of gas. Not a single human vessel had taken damage, or even been detected by enemy sensors. The galaxy fell silent as news of the impossible defeat spread through communication networks. The age of Council dominance was over, and everyone knew it. 6 months after the Battle of Nexus Point, the formal surrender ceremony took place aboard the EDS Nightfall, in a room that had witnessed the planning of humanity's rise to galactic power. Representatives from every major Council species sat around a conference table made of earth oak, their proud faces showing the humility that comes only from complete defeat. The document they signed would reshape the political structure of the entire known universe. Ambassador Helen Wright accepted the surrender with the same calm diplomacy she had shown throughout the crisis, as if humanity had always expected this outcome. The terms were surprisingly moderate for a species that had just achieved total military victory. Humanity had no interest in conquering alien worlds or enslaving other species. What they demanded was respect, fair treatment, and an end to the exploitation that had plagued the galaxy for centuries. The surrender document established humanity as the supreme military authority in galactic space, but it also created a new system of governance based on cooperation rather than domination. The old council would continue to exist, but its decisions would be subject to human approval. Trade routes would remain open to all species, but pirates and slavers would face immediate destruction by the dark matter fleet. Captain Jake Morrison found himself promoted to Fleet Admiral, commanding a growing force of invisible warships as more species requested human protection from their former oppressors. The dark matter technology remained exclusively human, despite countless attempts at espionage and reverse engineering. Every alien scientist who studied the captured debris from human weapons found only twisted metal and strange energy signatures that made no sense according to known physics. The secret of dark matter manipulation required a specific type of thinking that seemed to exist only in human minds. It required the ability to imagine things that appeared impossible, and then find ways to make them real. Humans were naturally good at this kind of creative problem solving, while alien species had spent thousands of years perfecting existing technologies rather than inventing completely new ones. Dr. Ryan Clark established the first Galactic Research Institute on Earth, where carefully selected alien scientists could work alongside human researchers to develop new technologies for peaceful purposes. The knowledge sharing was voluntary and limited, but it represented a new era of cooperation between species that had been enemies for generations. The Institute became a symbol of humanity's commitment to building a better galaxy rather than simply ruling through fear. The transformation was remarkable to observe. Within a year of the surrender, piracy had virtually disappeared from the major trade routes. Slave markets that had operated openly for centuries were shut down by human peacekeeping forces. Corrupt officials who had grown rich by exploiting weaker species found themselves facing dark matter warships that appeared without warning to deliver justice. Admiral Lisa Kane stood in her office overlooking the bustling spaceport that had grown around Earth's capital city and watched ships from dozens of worlds arriving and departing in peaceful commerce. The sight still amazed her sometimes. For 50 years, humanity had been treated as a minor nuisance by the galactic powers. Now those same powers sent their finest diplomats to Earth seeking trade agreements and mutual defense treaties. The change had not come without resistance. Some alien factions tried to develop new weapons that could counter dark matter technology, but their efforts always failed. The human advantage was not just technological but conceptual. Dark matter manipulation required an understanding of physics that went beyond traditional scientific thinking, and humans seemed to possess an intuitive grasp of concepts that confounded even the most brilliant alien minds. Captain Steve Rogers commanded routine patrols through former Council space, his ship moving unseen among the civilian traffic that flowed between worlds. The dark matter fleet had become the galaxy's police force, appearing wherever they were needed to maintain peace and order. The mere knowledge that invisible human ships might be watching was enough to prevent most criminal activity. The economic benefits of peace were enormous. Trade flourished as cargo ships no longer needed expensive military escorts to protect them from pirates. Scientific cooperation between species accelerated as researchers shared knowledge without fear of military exploitation. Art and culture began to spread freely through communication networks that had once carried only propaganda and threats. Dr. Emma Foster analyzed the social changes taking place across the galaxy and marveled at how quickly civilizations could adapt when the threat of violence was removed. Species that had been enemies for millennia began working together on projects that benefited everyone. The galaxy was discovering that cooperation was more profitable than conquest. The human approach to galactic governance was unlike anything that had existed before. Instead of demanding tribute or forcing alien species to adopt human customs, Earth encouraged diversity and local self-government. Human peacekeepers intervened only when weaker species were being oppressed or when trade disputes threatened to escalate into violence. Ambassador Wright found herself leading a new kind of diplomatic corps that focused on mediation and problem-solving rather than threats and ultimatums. The galaxy was learning that humanity preferred to resolve conflicts through negotiation, backed by overwhelming force, rather than through conquest and occupation. It was a more complex approach than simple military rule, but it created lasting stability instead of temporary submission. The dark matter fleet continued to grow as human shipyards produced new vessels with capabilities that improved with each generation. The technology was evolving rapidly as human engineers discovered new applications for dark matter manipulation. Ships could now travel faster than ever before, communicate across vast distances instantly, and defend themselves against any conceivable attack. Colonel Maria Santos established training academies where human officers learned to work with alien allies in joint peacekeeping operations. The programs were designed to build trust and understanding between species while maintaining human military superiority. Alien officers who completed the training became valuable ambassadors for the new galactic order in their home systems. Thizar galaxy was no longer silent with fear, but with the respectful quiet of a universe that had found its guardians. Humanity had taken the stage not through conquest but through the demonstration that impossible was just another word for undiscovered. The age of human galactic stewardship had begun, and even the stars themselves seemed to shine a little brighter in the growing light of peace. The revolution was complete, and the future belonged to all species working together under the protection of Earth's invisible fleet. The stars looked cold and distant as Captain Vextar studied the sensor readings on his command bridge. His yellow eyes glowed with satisfaction as he watched the small blip on his screen move slowly through space. The human cargo ship had been traveling the same route for 3 days now, and had no idea that 12 Zephyrian warships were following it through the darkness. Vextar's claws tapped against his command chair as he thought about how easy this would be. Humans were weak creatures who preferred trading to fighting. They built slow cargo ships and filled them with valuable goods that they moved between their scattered colonies. The Zephyrian Empire had been raiding human vessels for months now, and not once had they encountered any real resistance. The bridge of the Shadowclaw hummed with quiet activity as his crew prepared for the ambush. Lieutenant Kriax worked at the weapons console while Navigator Hextor plotted their attack formation. They had done this many times before with human ships, and it always ended the same way. The humans would surrender immediately and beg for their lives while the Zephyrians took everything valuable from their cargo holds. Far ahead of the alien fleet, the human ship called Lucky Strike moved through space at a steady pace. Her hull was old and scarred from countless cargo runs between the outer colonies. Solar panels jutted out from her sides like metal wings, and her single plasma cannon looked small and harmless. Anyone looking at her would see exactly what she appeared to be: a simple merchant vessel carrying farming equipment to some distant world. On the Lucky Strike's bridge, Commander Jake Morrison stood with his hands behind his back, watching the starfield through the main view screen. He was a tall man with dark hair and calm blue eyes that seemed to take in everything around him. His uniform looked like standard merchant crew clothing, but there was something about the way he carried himself that suggested he was more than just a simple trader. Chief Engineer Lisa Kane sat at her console running diagnostics on what the ship's computer listed as cargo hold systems. She was a woman in her 30s with short red hair and quick fingers that moved across her controls with practiced ease. The readouts on her screen showed normal merchant ship operations, but if anyone looked closely, they might notice that some of her systems drew more power than they should. Communications Officer Ben Carter maintained his position at the radio station, keeping watch for any incoming signals. He was young with brown hair and alert eyes that missed nothing. The communication array above the ship looked standard, but hidden inside its metal housing were sensors and transmitters that no civilian vessel should possess. Dr. Patricia Wells worked quietly in what the ship's manifest called the medical bay. She was preparing equipment that looked like standard emergency medical supplies, but served a very different purpose. Her blonde hair was tied back as she made final adjustments to systems that would soon prove their worth. Tactical Officer Amy Rodriguez sat at what appeared to be a simple navigation console. She was a woman with black hair and steady hands who seemed completely relaxed, despite the approaching danger. Her console looked normal, but hidden beneath its surface were controls for weapons that could level entire cities. Morrison had been expecting the Zephyrian attack for days now. Intelligence reports had warned him that alien raiders were operating in this sector and targeting human cargo ships. The Lucky Strike had been sent here specifically to encounter these raiders and deal with them in a way that would send a clear message to anyone else who might consider attacking human vessels. The asteroid field of Kepler 442 stretched out ahead of them like a maze of floating rocks and debris. It was the perfect place for an ambush because the large asteroids would block long-range sensors and make it impossible for any nearby ships to detect what was happening. The Zephyrians had chosen their hunting ground well, but they had made one critical mistake in their planning. They had assumed that the Lucky Strike was exactly what she appeared to be. Morrison walked over to Kane's station and glanced at her. Readouts. Everything was ready and waiting for his command. The ship's true systems were hidden behind false bulkheads and disguised as innocent cargo handling equipment. Months of careful preparation had gone into making the Lucky Strike look like a helpless merchant vessel, while hiding her real capabilities. Carter turned in his chair and gave Morrison a slight nod. The Zephyrian fleet was closing in and would be in position to spring their trap within minutes. Their ships were moving in the standard raider formation designed to surround and intimidate a civilian vessel into immediate surrender. The aliens had studied human merchant ships carefully and knew exactly what to expect. They knew about human trade routes and cargo schedules. They knew that human traders preferred profit to fighting and would surrender rather than risk their lives defending their goods. They had raided dozens of real merchant ships, and the pattern was always the same. What they did not know was that the Human Defense Initiative had been watching their activities and had developed a response. The Ghost Ship program had been created specifically to deal with raiders who targeted civilian vessels. Military ships disguised as merchants would patrol the trade routes and wait for attacks that would allow them to strike back. Morrison returned to his command position and watched the tactical display as red dots appeared on the screen around them. 12 Zephyrian warships were moving into attack formation and would soon demand their surrender. The aliens believed they were about to capture another helpless human cargo ship and steal everything valuable from her holds. Rodriguez caught Morrison's eye and raised one eyebrow slightly. Her hand rested casually near her console, but she was ready to activate systems that would turn the Lucky Strike from prey into predator in seconds. The transformation would be complete and devastating. The moment was almost here. Soon, the Zephyrians would learn that not every human ship was what it seemed to be. They would discover that humanity had been preparing for exactly this kind of encounter and had developed ways to turn their own tactics against them. In the depths of space, 12 alien warships closed in on what they believed was an easy target. They had no idea that they were about to face something that would change everything they thought they knew about humans and their capabilities in war. Captain Vextar smiled as his fleet moved into perfect attack formation around the human cargo ship. The Lucky Strike drifted helplessly between two massive asteroids, exactly where his intelligence reports had predicted she would be. Her energy signature showed nothing more threatening than basic life support systems and a single weak plasma cannon that looked like it had not been fired in years. The Shadow Claw and her 11 sister ships spread out in a wide circle around their target. Each Zephyrian vessel was 3 times larger than the human ship and carried enough firepower to destroy a small moon. Their dark hulls gleamed with weapon ports and sensor arrays, while their engines glowed bright blue in the darkness of space. Lieutenant Kriak studied his targeting systems and shook his reptilian head in disappointment. The human ship showed no signs of advanced shielding or defensive systems. Her hull was old and patched with metal plates that looked like they had been welded on by amateur mechanics. Solar collectors hung from her sides like broken wings, and her communication array was so outdated that it probably could not even send a distress signal fast enough to matter. Navigator Hextor confirmed what they all already knew. The Lucky Strike was completely surrounded with no chance of escape. The asteroids blocked any retreat, while the Zephyrian ships controlled every possible exit route. This would be another easy victory for the Empire, and another example of human weakness for the rest of the galaxy to witness. Vextar activated his communication system and prepared to deliver the standard surrender demand. He had given this same speech to dozens of human captains, and they always responded the same way. First came denial, then fear, then desperate bargaining, and finally complete submission. Humans were predictable creatures who valued their lives more than their cargo or their pride. On the bridge of the Lucky Strike, Commander Morrison listened to the alien transmission with the calm expression of someone who had been expecting exactly this moment. The Zephyrian captain spoke in broken human language with a voice full of arrogance and contempt. He demanded immediate surrender and threatened destruction if his orders were not followed within 60 seconds. Morrison looked around at his crew and saw the same quiet readiness in all their faces. Kane continued working at her engineering console as if nothing unusual was happening. Carter monitored communication frequencies with professional attention to detail. Wells finished her preparations in the medical bay, while Rodriguez kept one hand near her tactical controls. None of them looked like frightened merchants facing certain death. They looked like soldiers waiting for orders. Morrison activated his own communication system and responded to the alien ultimatum. His voice carried exactly the right mixture of fear and resignation, as he identified himself as a simple cargo ship captain, carrying farming equipment to the outer colonies. He begged the aliens not to hurt his crew and promised to cooperate fully with their demands. The performance was perfect. Vexitar heard exactly what he expected to hear from a terrified human trader who knew he was completely outgunned and surrounded. The captain's voice shook with emotion as he asked for mercy and promised that his cargo holds contained nothing but agricultural machinery and terraforming supplies. But there were details that did not quite match what Vexitar had seen in previous encounters with human merchants. The crew on the Lucky Strike moved with too much coordination and discipline. Their positions on the bridge seemed more tactical than commercial. The way they responded to their captain's orders suggested military training rather than civilian experience. Lieutenant Kriax noticed something strange about the human ship's power distribution. Most merchant vessels would have shut down non-essential systems by now to conserve energy for life support. The Lucky Strike was running all her systems at normal levels as if power consumption was not a concern. Her reactor output seemed higher than what a ship her size should need for basic operations. Navigator Hextor studied the tactical display and frowned at what he saw. The human ship had positioned herself in the asteroid field with what looked like random chance, but her location actually provided some interesting defensive advantages. She could use the large rocks for cover, and her enemies would have to be careful about their firing angles to avoid hitting each other. The more Vexitar studied the situation, the more he began to feel that something was not quite right. Intelligence. Reports had assured him that human merchants were easy targets who surrendered immediately when faced with overwhelming force. This crew seemed too calm and too organized for civilians who should be panicking in the face of certain death. Morrison continued his act as a frightened cargo ship captain while secretly monitoring his crew's preparations. Kane had powered up systems that were hidden so well that even close inspection would not reveal their true purpose. The Lucky Strike's real capabilities were concealed behind false bulkheads and disguised as innocent merchant equipment. Wells activated combat medical protocols that would be needed very soon. Her medical bay contained treatment systems for injuries that civilian merchants should never expect to encounter. Everything was designed to support military operations while maintaining the appearance of routine commercial activities. Rodriguez ran final checks on weapons systems that did not officially exist. Her navigation console was actually a tactical control station, capable of coordinating attacks that could level entire fleets. The Lucky Strike carried enough hidden firepower to destroy every ship in the Zephyrian formation. Carter prepared communication, equipment that could broadcast on military frequencies across half the galaxy. When this encounter was over, the entire known universe would hear exactly what had happened to the aliens who had dared to attack a human vessel. The message would serve as a warning to anyone else who might consider humans to be easy prey. The 60-second deadline approached, and Vexitar prepared to accept the human surrender. He planned to board their ship and take everything valuable, while leaving the crew stranded in the asteroid field, as a lesson to other merchants about the price of traveling through Zephyrian space without paying proper tribute to the Empire. Morrison smiled slightly as he watched the countdown timer reach 0. The aliens had positioned themselves exactly where he wanted them. They were confident and unprepared for what was about to happen. In a few more seconds, they would learn that attacking human ships was the last mistake they would ever make. The 60 seconds expired, and Captain Vexitar prepared to order his boarding parties to dock with the human vessel. Everything was proceeding exactly according to plan, and the Lucky Strike would soon be another easy prize for the Zephyrian Empire. His soldiers were already moving toward their assault craft when something made him pause and take a closer look at his sensor readings. The human ship was still broadcasting surrender messages and begging for mercy, but there was something different about her energy signature now. Small fluctuations in her power systems suggested activity that did not match what a frightened merchant crew should be doing. Most civilian captains would be shutting down everything except life support to show their complete helplessness. Lieutenant Kriak suddenly looked up from his console with confusion written across his scaled features. The targeting computer was having difficulty getting a solid lock on the human vessel, even though she was sitting perfectly still between the asteroids. Something was interfering with their sensors in ways that should not be possible for a simple cargo ship. Navigator Hextor checked his instruments twice before reporting what he was seeing to his captain. The Lucky Strike's hull configuration seemed to be changing in subtle ways that made no sense for a merchant vessel. Metal plates were shifting position, and what had looked like damage from countless cargo runs was actually some kind of adaptive camouflage system. Morrison waited until he was certain that the alien boarding craft were committed to their approach before giving the signal his crew had been waiting for. The time for deception was over, and the lucky strike was about to reveal her true nature to the galaxy. He looked at Rodriguez and nodded once. The transformation began instantly and was more dramatic than anything the Zephyrians had ever witnessed. False hull plating slid away with mechanical precision to reveal weapon ports that had been completely hidden moments before. The Lucky Strike's true configuration emerged as stealth systems powered down, and her real design became visible for the first time. What had appeared to be a defenseless merchant vessel was actually one of the most advanced warships in human space. The USS Phantom had been disguised so perfectly that even close inspection had failed to reveal her military nature. Her adaptive hull plating had mimicked the appearance of an old cargo hauler while concealing weapons that could destroy entire fleets. Kane brought the ship's main reactor online, and power readings jumped to levels that made the Zephyrian sensors scream warnings across their bridge. The fusion plant hidden in the Phantom's core was designed to power weapon systems that the aliens had never encountered. Energy flowed through conduits that had been disguised as simple cargo handling equipment. Rodriguez activated tactical systems that transformed her navigation console into a weapons control station capable of coordinating attacks across multiple target zones. The Phantom carried plasma torpedoes that could phase through enemy shields and quantum disruptors that could tear apart matter at the atomic level. Her defensive systems included adaptive shielding that could adjust to any known weapon type. Wells completed activation of the electronic warfare suite that would turn the aliens' own systems against them. The medical bay contained computers, powerful enough to hack into enemy networks and reprogram their targeting systems. Within seconds, she would be able to make the Zephyrian ships fire on each other instead of their intended target. Carter powered up communication arrays that would broadcast this encounter across the entire known galaxy. The message would reach every species within 50 light years and serve as a warning about what happened to those who attacked human vessels. The age of treating humans as easy prey was about to end forever. The Phantom's true shape was sleek and predatory, with weapon systems that seemed to grow from her hull like mechanical claws. Her engines glowed with contained fusion fire, while her shields shimmered with energy fields that could deflect anything the Zephyrians might throw at her. She was a hunter that had been disguised as harmless prey. Captain Vextar stared in complete shock as his sensors registered the impossible transformation taking place before his eyes. The targeting computer was identifying weapon systems that should not exist on any civilian vessel. Energy readings showed a military fusion reactor with enough output to power a battlecruiser. The ship's hull was reconfiguring itself into an attack formation. The Shadow Claw's bridge erupted in chaos as officers tried to understand what they were seeing. Lieutenant Kriak shouted warnings about massive weapon signatures, while Navigator Hextor reported that their tactical formation was now completely wrong for engaging a military target. They had positioned themselves to intimidate a merchant ship, not fight an advanced destroyer. Morrison's voice came across all communication frequencies, and his tone was completely different now. The fear and resignation were gone, replaced by cold military professionalism that sent chills through every alien who heard it. He identified himself as Commander Morrison of the Terran Defense Force and explained that the Zephyrians had just made the worst mistake of their lives. The Lucky Strike had never been a merchant vessel at all. She was the USS Phantom operating under deep cover as part of humanity's ghost ship program. Her mission was to locate and eliminate threats to human commerce, while demonstrating that attacking civilian vessels would result in swift and devastating retaliation. Rodriguez brought weapons online and targeting systems locked onto every Zephyrian ship simultaneously. The Phantom could engage multiple targets with precision that would have been impossible for the aliens to imagine. Her computers calculated firing solutions that would maximize damage while minimizing the chance of any enemy vessel escaping to report what they had witnessed. The Zephyrian Empire had based their entire strategy on the belief that humans were weak traitors who would surrender rather than fight. They had conducted months of successful raids against real merchant ships and grown confident that no human vessel posed any real threat to their operations. Intelligence reports had assured them that humans preferred profit to warfare. They were about to learn that intelligence reports could be wrong, and that humanity had been preparing for exactly this kind of encounter. The Ghost Ship program had been designed to turn the aliens' own tactics against them, and demonstrate that human space was protected by forces they could not see or predict. Morrison gave his final warning to the alien fleet before ordering his crew to show the galaxy why attacking human ships was the last mistake anyone would ever make. The battle began with a flash of brilliant light as Rodriguez fired the Phantom's first salvo of quantum torpedoes. The weapons moved through space like streaks of pure energy and passed through the Zephyrian shields as if they did not exist at all. The torpedoes were designed to phase shift at the moment of impact and detonate inside the target's hull, where no defensive system could stop them. Two Zephyrian cruisers simply vanished in explosions of white fire that turned their hulls into expanding clouds of superheated gas and metal fragments. Captain Vextar watched in horror as ships that had been there one moment were completely gone the next. His sensors could not even detect debris from the destroyed vessels, because the quantum weapons had reduced them to their basic atomic particles. Lieutenant Kriax frantically worked his weapons console trying to target the human ship, but the Phantom was no longer where his sensors said she should be. Morrison had ordered Kane to transfer all power from the stealth systems to engines and shields. The human vessel moved through space with impossible speed and grace while Zephyrian targeting computers struggled to track something that seemed to bend the laws of physics. The Phantom danced between enemy weapons fire like a deadly ghost that could not be touched. Her adaptive shielding absorbed the few shots that managed to connect, while her hull plating shifted color and texture to confuse optical targeting systems. She was a predator, designed to hunt in the darkness between stars while her prey fumbled, blindly trying to land a killing blow. Navigator Hextor screamed warnings as 3 more Zephyrian ships fell victim to the human weapons. The quantum disruptors tore through their hulls at the molecular level, while plasma torpedoes melted armor plating that should have been able to withstand direct hits from small asteroids. Nothing in their arsenal seemed capable of stopping the human attack. Wells activated the electronic warfare systems and began her assault on the alien computer networks. The Zephyrian ships used interconnected tactical systems that allowed them to coordinate their attacks and share targeting information. This connectivity was designed to be their greatest strength, but Wells turned it into a fatal weakness within seconds. Virus programs flowed through the alien networks like digital poison and began rewriting command codes at the most basic levels. Zephyrian targeting computers suddenly identified their own ships as enemy vessels, while navigation systems began plotting collision courses with nearby asteroids. The aliens found themselves fighting their own equipment as much as the human destroyer. 2 more enemy vessels collided with each other when their navigation systems failed simultaneously. The impact cracked both hulls and sent them spinning into the asteroid field where they broke apart against the massive rocks. Another ship fired its main guns at what its computer insisted was a human target, but actually hit its own flagship's shield generators. The Shadow Claw shuddered under friendly fire from her own escort vessels while Vextar tried desperately to regain control of the battle. His fleet was falling apart faster than he could give orders, and the human ship continued to move through his formation like an unstoppable force of destruction. Every weapon he fired seemed to miss, while every human shot found its target with deadly precision. Carter had been monitoring alien communications since the battle began, and he could hear the panic in their voices as they realized they were completely outmatched. Zephyrian officers shouted contradictory orders while their captains begged for reinforcements that would never arrive. The Empire's finest fleet was being systematically destroyed by a single human vessel. Morrison watched the tactical display as red dots representing enemy ships continued to disappear from his screen. The Phantom's computer calculated that the battle would be over within 8 more minutes at the current rate of destruction. Not one of his crew had been injured while the Zephyrian fleet was being reduced to cosmic debris. Kane redirected power to the main weapons as Rodriguez prepared for the final phase of the engagement. The remaining alien ships were trying to form a defensive formation, but their damaged systems made coordination impossible. Half of their vessels were firing at shadows while the other half couldn't tell friend from foe. The Phantom struck again, with a concentrated barrage that targeted the enemy command ship's vital systems. Quantum torpedoes phased through the shadow claws, shields and detonated in her engine room, while disruptor beams carved through her weapon ports. The flagship's main reactor went critical and filled the bridge with alarms that no one could silence. Vexitar felt his ship dying around him as bulkheads buckled and atmosphere began venting into space. His crew was abandoning their posts and running for the escape pods while fires spread through corridors that had been breached by human weapons. The pride of the Zephyrian Navy was falling apart like a toy that had been stepped on by a giant. Wells completed her electronic assault by uploading a final virus that would broadcast surrender messages from every remaining alien ship. The Zephyrian vessels began transmitting their own destruction as they begged for mercy that would not be granted. Their tactical networks collapsed entirely and left each ship fighting alone against an enemy they could not see or understand. Rodriguez fired, the last salvo that ended the Battle of Kepler 442, as historians would later call it. The remaining Zephyrian ships exploded one by one in brilliant flashes of light that illuminated the asteroid field like fireworks. Metal fragments bounced off the massive rocks while expanding gas clouds slowly dispersed into the vacuum of space. In less than 10 minutes, 12 warships of the Zephyrian Empire had been reduced to scrap metal and atomic particles. The aliens, who had expected an easy victory over helpless human merchants, had instead encountered military technology that was centuries beyond anything they possessed. Their superior numbers and heavy weapons had meant nothing against human tactics and engineering. Morrison looked around his bridge at crew members who had just won the most one-sided victory in recorded galactic history. Not a single system on the Phantom had been damaged, and no human lives had been lost. The Ghost ship had performed exactly as designed and sent a message that would echo across known space for generations to come. The silence after the battle was broken only by the sound of debris hitting the asteroid field, as pieces of destroyed Zephyrian warships drifted through space like metal snow. Commander Morrison stood on the bridge of the USS Phantom and watched. The tactical display showed nothing but empty space where 12 enemy vessels had been floating just minutes before. The ambush that was supposed to capture a helpless human cargo ship had instead resulted in the complete destruction of an entire alien battle fleet. Carter worked at his communication station preparing to broadcast a message that would reach every listening post and relay station within 50 light years of their position. The recording equipment captured every detail of what had just happened, including the tactical data that showed how quickly and completely the Zephyrian ships had been eliminated. This information would spread through the galaxy faster than the fastest ship could travel. Morrison activated the wideband transmitter and began speaking in a calm, professional voice that carried the authority of someone who had just proven that humanity was not the weak species that most aliens believed them to be. He identified himself as Commander Jake Morrison of the Terran Defense Force, and explained that the Lucky Strike had never been a merchant vessel at all, but rather a military ship operating under deep cover. The camera system recorded Morrison as he stood on his bridge with his crew working quietly at their stations behind him. These were not frightened traders who had gotten lucky in a fight against superior numbers. They were professional soldiers who had planned and executed a perfect military operation designed to send a message that would be heard across known space. Morrison gestured toward the main view screen that showed the debris field where the Zephyrian fleet had been destroyed. He explained that the aliens had made the mistake of believing intelligence reports that described humans as peaceful merchants who would surrender rather than fight. Those reports had been deliberately created to hide humanity's true military capabilities from potential enemies. The Phantom had been one of dozens of ghost ships operating throughout human space disguised as civilian vessels while actually carrying enough firepower to destroy entire fleets. The program had been created specifically to deal with raiders and pirates who targeted what they believed were defenseless cargo ships. Today had been the first time that a ghost ship had encountered a major alien military force. Kane powered down the combat systems and began the process of returning the ship to her merchant vessel disguise. The false hull plating slid back into position while weapon ports closed, and the adaptive camouflage system made the Phantom look like the old cargo hauler Lucky Strike once again. Within minutes, no casual observer would suspect that she was anything other than what she appeared to be. Wells completed her final electronic warfare tasks by uploading virus programs into the wreckage of the alien ships. Any attempt to recover data from the destroyed vessels would trigger additional programs designed to erase evidence of human technology while broadcasting more surrender messages. The Zephyrian Empire would learn about their defeat, but they would not discover exactly how it had been accomplished. Rodriguez secured the weapon systems and returned her console to navigation mode, while Carter prepared multiple copies of the battle recording for transmission to every major communication hub. In this sector of the galaxy, the message would be broadcast on civilian frequencies as well as military channels to ensure that both governments and private organizations received the warning. Morrison continued his recorded message by explaining that humanity did not seek war with any species but would not tolerate attacks on human vessels or colonies. The destruction of the Zephyrian fleet was not an act of aggression, but rather a defensive response to an unprovoked assault on what the aliens believed was a civilian cargo ship carrying farming equipment to the outer colonies. The recording included tactical analysis that showed exactly how the human weapons had penetrated Zephyrian shields and armor. The quantum torpedoes had phased through defensive systems that should have been able to stop conventional weapons, while the disruptor beams had torn through hull plating at the molecular level. No known defense could stop these weapons once they were fired. Carter began transmitting the message to communication relays throughout the local star systems. Within hours, every major government and military organization would know that humanity possessed technology far beyond what they had previously demonstrated. The myth of human weakness would be replaced by a reputation for devastating military capability. Morrison addressed the recording directly to any species that might be considering attacks on human vessels. He warned that the Ghost Ship program had placed military vessels disguised as merchants throughout human space, and that any attempt to raid civilian shipping would result in the same fate that had befallen the Zephyrian fleet. Humanity would defend itself with overwhelming force. The message also contained an offer of peaceful cooperation with any species that respected human sovereignty and treated human vessels with appropriate diplomatic courtesy. Morrison emphasized that humanity preferred trade and exploration to warfare, but was fully prepared to defend itself against any threat. The choice of peace or war would be left to the other species of the galaxy. Wells activated a final transmission that would be broadcast continuously from automated beacons throughout the asteroid field. Any ship that entered this system would receive detailed information about what had happened here, including tactical recordings that showed the complete destruction of 12 alien warships by a single human vessel. The battle site would become a monument to human military capability. The USS Phantom completed her transformation back into the Lucky Strike and resumed course toward the outer colonies as if nothing had happened. Her cargo holds still contained the farming equipment listed in her manifest, while her crew returned to their cover identities as civilian merchants. The Ghost Ship would continue her mission until called upon to defend humanity once again. Within days, the recording of Morrison's message had reached every major civilization in the galaxy. Some species dismissed it as propaganda, while others began immediate reviews of their threat assessments regarding human capabilities. The Zephyrian Empire never recovered from the loss of their elite fleet and abandoned all plans for further raids on human shipping. More importantly, the galaxy learned that humanity was not the weak species that intelligence reports had suggested. Human ships were no longer considered easy targets, and the Ghost Ship program expanded to include more military vessels operating under civilian disguises. The reputation for strength that humanity gained from the Battle of Kepler 442 protected human lives and commerce for generations to come.